Welcome back to the Centered on Buffalo podcast. We're joined by two familiar faces here today and two familiar voices. That's Josh Reed, Sal Capaccio. Really looking forward to chopping it up with you guys on this previous Super Bowl. We both obviously wish we were all out there in Vegas covering the game for the Bills. Different plans, and familiar face one again. The Chiefs caught another one, 3 in 5 years. But let's start here before we get going. Josh, what was and I'm thinking I probably know the answer since you guys have a newborn at home. Did you guys do anything party-wise or anything for the Super Bowl?
I watched the first half at home. You're right. No, there was no party. Being able to listen to any part of the game was a victory on my end and watch any part of the game. But, yeah, we just hung out at home, hung out with the kids, chased them around the living room a little bit. They will sit and watch because 3-year-old and almost 2. They'll sit and watch for about 3 or 4 plays at a time, and then it's time to try to reenact the play on each other, which is always an interesting deal. But, yeah, no party. And then at halftime, I came into work and I anchored the 11 o'clock news afterwards. So, but it wasn't crazy.
What'd you get it to, Sal?
So in the afternoon, we actually went to my mom's house for a turkey dinner. And you think about turkey and Thanksgiving, but we had some family in town, and my mom said, "Hey, I'll make a turkey if you want to come over." And it's normally early anyway, so we got home a little before the Super Bowl actually started. And I will tell you, so it was just me and Max and Yana. We watched the first half on Nickelodeon. It was awesome. I loved it. It was a great broadcast. I think actually there were things that happened on Nickelodeon on the broadcast that I actually think that regular broadcasts should incorporate that would actually help listeners and viewers and teach them about football a little bit.
Yeah, I heard that they explained a holding call about as good as anybody could ever explain it. And they would go through rules. Yep. And we should have, we were at a party at a friend's house here in Louisville, and all the kids were in one room, but we didn't have the Nickelodeon coverage on. We should have turned that on for them. And I don't know if you guys have heard or heard all the criticism that Romo's catching for his end of game call, and they're saying that the Nickelodeon crew should have that's what they should be replaying at the end. But what were your guys' thoughts on Romo's call at the end?
Well, let me kind of circle back real quick to that. Leave it to kids in that realm to simplify everything and just make it easy. I feel like sometimes we dig into the weeds so much, and not just us, just like the entire surrounding of football. It's just digging into the weeds so much that it becomes confusing. And then, Nickelodeon then, because I'm sure it was just, I didn't hear it, Sal, but I'm sure it was just a simple explanation where you go, well, that completely makes sense, right?
I'll give you an example. So there was a personal foul called. It was a roughing the passer. And literally it happens, and then Dora pops up and goes, a roughing the passer is when blah, 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 blah. Or a personal foul is when, and literally reads the basic part of the rule book. And then the most hilarious thing was at the bottom, there was a graphic that said, yeah, you can't do that. It was amazing, right? I'm laughing. Anyway, and then in another part, this is great. She comes on and she says, the referee wears the white hat. He's one of 7 officials on the field, and that's how you differentiate between the others. And I'm like, that's actually good information for people who probably don't watch football on a regular basis. And even if we went, and I did this, it's a great thought experiment. If you go to one of your friends and say, real quick, just tell me how many officials are on an NFL field, how many would know off the bat it's 7? And she says 1 of 7. And I said, I think that's great information to just kind of throw out there during a game that people know.
Yeah, it's oftentimes like when I'm watching a game with my wife or people that don't follow football, they have the best questions, and it's refreshing to hear. And then, sometimes even if your buddies don't know the answer, they're too ashamed to admit it. And so, I think that's excellent that they do that, and it's teaching the kids the game as well and getting them to understand it. So really awesome job by Nickelodeon. Circle back real quick, and we don't have to stay too long on this, but because I really want to dig into kind of some of the meat of the game and takeaways. But Romo's catching a lot of grief. He caught a lot of grief all season for his broadcasts, and there's a lot of people that say he's not bringing a lot of substance. The novelty of the play prediction and him and Nance not doing a traditional broadcast, which was the most appealing part at first, that, there was more give and take than there was the traditional play setup, commentary, play setup, commentary. It was, hey, I'll lay out and let Romo predict the play. But now it seems like the public opinion is that that kind of shtick has wore thin. I am still a tremendous fan of both of theirs. I think they do as entertaining of a job as anyone out there, which is the reason you watch football is for entertainment purposes. And then my wife would tell you my number one man crush is Jim Nance. So all that being said, I wasn't as critical as most, but what were your guys' thoughts on that end sequence at least?
Yeah, I was fine with it. I'm kind of where you stand on it. I hear all the criticism as well. I think they do a really good job. I think part of they have to walk a really fine line because, in my opinion, the best announcers at the end of the game, you maybe only remember one or two of their calls where you go, wow, they really captured that moment. I don't want at the end of the game to be thinking more about the announcer than I am about the game. And there are some announcers that try to make it about them. How often do we talk about officials? Oh man, that official seems to try to make the game about him. Nobody's paying to watch the official; they're paying to watch the players. And I feel like sometimes there are a few announcers that head down that road. I'm fine with Nance and Romo. I think they do a very, very good job. Now, to be honest with you, the exact play you're talking about, I've read about on Twitter and everything. I did not hear it verbatim. I was in the middle of editing my sportscast and getting ready to walk out and go on air and deliver it. So, Sal, you probably heard a little bit more closely exactly what was said.
So there's two parts of the end of the game that I'll touch on. Number one, I thought they did a horrible job of explaining the end of the overtime quarter. That was my biggest gripe. So I woke up, no lie, guys, I woke up to texts from friends, people in the news radio industry, not sports, asking me what would have happened if it went to 0. No one explained that. When you have that, that means they did not do a good job of that. There were people confused on Twitter asking me, did they have to score before zeros? They did not. It was a new game. It was the end of the first quarter of overtime. They would have just simply flipped sides and gone to the other side to play. Now, we can argue with the rules and what matters with the clock, but all it took was for Nance or Romo or Sterator or Tracy or Evan to say, hey, they don't have to score before it gets to 0. They just flip sides to do it to start another quarter. But at the end of the next quarter, they would have to score because that would be basically the end of a half. Just saying it's a new game isn't good enough for the average listener. So I thought they did a horrible job with that. As far as the end of game, the final play, I thought it was great. The great line jackpot. That was great. They're in Vegas, right? Jackpot. Right. That's great. But I did think Romo should have let it breathe a little bit more. I'm reminded of like Jack Buck on the home run call of 1987. We'll see you again tomorrow night. And then that's it. You do not hear anything after that except the crowd roaring. And then Joe Buck did the same thing when they were in the same situation in a World Series. Like those things, you don't want the color analyst coming in. But that's okay. I mean, it's not a big deal to me. And then lastly, I'll say, I do think the novelty's kind of worn off about like the predicting of things. I said this on the radio just to tell you, Eric. Eric, you're so good at after a play in radio, you don't even need the replay. You can dissect what every lineman did. I don't know how you do it. You could say, oh yeah, the backside guard on that play, like literally right after the play ends. And I'm like, oh my God. I think Greg Olson's great at that. Joel Klatt's great at that. They're in TV, you're in radio. I need more of that, I think, than I do, here's what I think is coming up.
Yeah, well, one, I appreciate you saying that. For some broadcasts, our monitor in front of us is about a second or two delayed, which is perfect. Sometimes it's 10 seconds, it's worthless. If it's live, it's worthless because I can't, get that slight, delay. It's like a slight replay for me. And so as I'm watching it, okay, the play breaks. Okay, I'm now watching it on the screen. I know the run's going to break. Okay, who's the key block? And so that really helps. Not every week do we get that. And we got to get Greg Harvey on that. I mean,
I know.
Just kidding. Greg does so much for us, and it's completely out of his control. But I give him crap for it every week if it isn't in sync like that. But a lot of times I understand that. Look, people don't necessarily care about the line play. When I was playing, I'm naturally drawn to that just because that's my job. I'm watching defenders. That's how we watch film. I'm watching 3 hours of film a day. And so I'm ingrained to watch the offensive line. As I got into broadcasting, okay, not everyone wants to hear about the line. So if it's 3rd and 10, I might be watching the secondary or the receivers more than I'm necessarily watching the line. If it's 1st and 10 in a run-heavy formation, I might be watching the line more than that. And so, yeah, I mean, the Tony Romo predicting of plays got really popular. That's part of the reason they paid him $18 million a year, because of the AFC Championship game between the Bucs and the Patriots. But then now it's not as, it's just kind of wore off where, okay, we don't want to hear that constantly. You give us a few times a game where you say, ooh, watch this. And then you feel smart in front of your buddies. If you're doing it too much, it's just going to wear off.
Hey, Eric, real quick. What's your pre-snap read as a color analyst now? What do you focus on? Because when you're watching it big picture-wise, what are your eyes drawn to most of the time?
Man, that's a great question. So if it's 1st and 10, normal down and distance, I'm watching for formations. I want to see, and it doesn't even necessarily apply to radio. It almost helps me more for my stuff on the Sean McDermott show the next day where I'm breaking down the film. But I'm looking for setups. Is this a formation tendency? Is this the same motion as before? Is this the same motion from last week? Same formation, same personnel. I'm looking for formational tendencies generally on the offense. When it comes to obvious pass situations, it might be something that we're tracking, whether, is Diggs getting followed by their top corner? Did we just put Saran Neal in the game to now man up against Travis Kelce in the Chiefs game? Do we have dime personnel in? I'm kind of watching the personnel mainly pre-snap. And then, okay, what kind of look are we in? And I'm always watching the Bills. Generally always watching the Bills. So if the Bills are on defense, okay, oh man, they have 3 guys at the line of scrimmage and they just walked up. Dorian Williams is a D tackle. Okay, what are they going to do? Okay, this is more interesting than maybe the back end of this play. Or, it's just a traditional 4-man front up top. Okay, what are the Bills doing back end of the defense? And so that's a long way of saying it kind of depends on the play. I'm generally always focused on the Bills unless – let's say the Bills are playing the Raiders and it's 3rd and 10 and it's early in the game. Okay, how are they addressing Max Crosby in this game? Because that's going to be interesting to the broadcast. Even if guys can't see it at home or guys and gals can't see it at home, it's going to be interesting how we're handling Max Crosby. So it really depends on the matchups and, but when I first started calling games, I found myself saying, ooh, the Bills just checked in, so-and-so to play defensive end on this play, because I would be watching that from the sideline. If I'm on the opposing offensive line, I'm like, who are they bringing in here for this 3rd down? Like, what are the pass rushers? So I found myself saying that sometimes in the broadcast. I'm like, unless they're like checking in Von Miller this year or, maybe Leonard Floyd when he was hot. Okay, that might apply to the broadcast, but we don't necessarily need to bring that up each and every time on there. All right, so let's get into some of the meat and potatoes of the game. Obviously, the Chiefs win this one. We mentioned 3 out of 5 earlier. It's becoming a dynasty. It truly is. If it wasn't already, it is now. They have a pedestrian regular season where it almost seemed at times like they were dead in the water. They don't have enough weapons, and then they run through the playoffs and win it all. Now, those weren't blowouts on the way there. They handled Baltimore pretty good, but Bills game tight. And then obviously the Super Bowl goes to overtime. But I guess let's start here. I mean, Mahomes puts himself in rare company. Who is it? Aikman, Bradshaw, Montana, and Brady. And now Mahomes, only 5 quarterbacks all time to win 3 Super Bowls. Man, he's truly starting to separate himself, isn't he?
Yeah, your sigh in the middle of that statement, I think, said it all. Right? And I think that sigh – it captures the feeling of every single Bills fan. I mean, I think 99% of them were rooting for the 49ers to get it done. And they came out and the Niners, they jump out to that 10-0 lead. And it was like McCaffrey was really involved and picking up big chunks. And it was like Mahomes kind of looked like the offense it didn't have any rhythm early on. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this is it. Kelce was just not a non-factor. I keep going back to that fumbled on the punt. I think really flipped everything. I think that changed it all because it took Patrick Mahomes one play after that. And suddenly you just felt, you could feel it. You could feel the entire pendulum go. And then it was just, it became, will Patrick Mahomes get the ball at the end of the game and do what we all think he's going to do? And that's exactly what happened.
And that's what we usually saw from Brady in a lot of those situations, right? I mean, so many comparables to the way their dynasty started, the Patriots back in the early 2000s, the way this dynasty has started, right? 3-5, Patriots had 3-4. The Chiefs have been now to 6 straight AFC Championship games, which is amazing. The Patriots at the tail end went to 8. Ray fumbling that ball, I agree, and unfortunately it's on him, but he did the right thing. He had to try and pick it up. He just couldn't get it because he wasn't expecting to have to pick it up because it hit his teammate. Look, I just think that they're a model of you have to play almost a perfect game to beat them in these critical games in big situations. And even if it's not perfect, you just can't make too many mistakes. That's what happened. That's what the Bills have done. That's what the Ravens did. That's what the Niners did. It's not about I'm trying to kind of train even my audience on WGR the way I speak to not look at it at Josh Allen can't beat Patrick Mahomes, Sean McDermott can't beat Andy Reid, or Lamar can't beat Patrick Mahomes. It's really about who they are. It's not about who the Bills aren't or who the Ravens aren't. They are so good. They're the perfect combination of coach and player now, and they just keep playing and keep making you play. And they just made them play and made them play until finally, the 49ers made a couple mistakes and critical mistakes. So I think that's where they are right now. Now, I will say, as much as it seems like it'll never end, the Patriots got 3-4, and then they didn't win one for 10 years. You can beat them, but in those 10 years, they still went to 2 others, and it's still going to take a really great effort and some games where you don't make mistakes against them.
Yeah, that was one of my big notes, Sal, was that it reminds me of the Patriots. That's one of my notes, that the way they're playing football now is they beat you situationally. Mm-hmm. They don't make the crucial mistake, and then they wait for you to do it. And at this point, they have so much experience in big games. Now, from their 2019 season, 2020 Super Bowl to this one, only 3 starters are on that same roster: Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, and Travis Kelce. But they have so much experience in big games, especially at the quarterback position, that the moment's not too big for them. And it's like, okay, we could talk about you give Patrick Mahomes the ball at the end of the game, he's likely going to beat you. Well, he's generally playing with 4 downs all the way down the field, and he's just so used to that now. Okay, they get the 4th and 1. They're at their own 30-something. They run an RPO with a play action off the backside. He fakes it to Kelce. He picks up 7 with his legs, new first down. And it wasn't even close. There was no suspense on that play. And
let me ask you, though, Eric, if Bosa doesn't crash, do they have a chance to stop that play?
If Bosa doesn't crash, then I think it was an RPO to where he just hands it off and it's an easy first down.
Okay. Because if you watch that replay, I'm like, man, if Bosa just stays there and you just say, Bosa, you have Mahomes. I don't care what happens. You got to go to Mahomes. I don't know, but you're right. Maybe they hand it off because Kelce was coming out the backside. It looked like that was the second option there if he gets to the outside. But I think that Joey Bosa just completely crashed down the line and maybe they don't get it. But I thought that was interesting on that play because it's what you're taught as a young defensive end from Little League. Don't bite. And he bit.
Well, it was likely an RPO in the sense that right tackle is run blocking.
Right.
So he trails his hip down the line. He takes away the run. Now who's coming off of him to scrape for Mahomes? And whoever the secondary player was right there that was guarding Kelce and ran with him, I would have almost rather him just go try and blow up Mahomes. And then who knows what happens on the play. Maybe Kelce gets 10, but regardless, when you run away from Mahomes there, it's 4th and 1. He's taken off up the field. I mean, I was looking at prop bets before the game, and the Patrick Mahomes over on a rushing, I think it was right around 27. He was over. And then his longest run of the game, 13.5. And I was like, he always rips off a 15, 20-yarder in every big moment in these playoff games. Like, as soon as you forget about his legs, he's going to rip one off. Of course, that one covers as well. But, yeah, I mean, it's just, they're not going to make mistakes at the end of the ball game right now, not to make the crucial ones. And then I'm not saying they were saving red zone plays for the playoffs, but this is the first time that I can remember with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes where they weren't in the top probably 5 in red zone touchdown percentage, and they were outside the top 15 this year. And then in the playoffs, it feels like they score every time when they get in the red zone.
I got a weird scenario for both of you guys, and tell me what you think. If there was a 1% chance that Tom Brady was ever going to come back on the field before that Super Bowl, did that number go up at all now that Patrick Mahomes has another one? Is there any part, do you guys think, in Tom Brady's mind where he goes, all right, maybe I got to go get one more? I mean, is that possible?
It's definitely possible. I almost think he doesn't want to come back and show another loss to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that'd be something to consider as well. I don't know. Brady's last year, and look, I love. Let me say this. I have a ton of respect for Tom Brady. And even in his last year, he put up numbers, but he did not look like himself out there. And it's almost like he at times looked like he had that kind of grumpy old man syndrome where, like, throughout his career, like, yes, he'd get on the offensive line, and that's part of the deal. When you're that respected, you can act like a coach on the field and no one's going to get that mad at you. But it seemed like that last year he was just not in a good spot to where you're like, okay, this time it truly is it. I got to tell this story real quick, and I might have told you guys this one before, but when they won the Super Bowl and Tom got drunk as a skunk on those boats after the game and he's passing around the Lombardi trophy, I was up early the next day. It's like 5-some in the morning, catch a workout. I'm in the sauna afterwards. And I was like, you know what? This is going to sound even worse than I'm in the sauna texting Tom Brady. But I was like, I'm in the sauna. I was like, let me text Tom, or let me shoot him an email real quick. That way, it doesn't wake him up. But, like, I just want to, be one of the first ones to congratulate him and tell me I hope he enjoyed his day yesterday and all that. He responded in like 15 minutes. He responded at 5:50 in the morning after, getting all lit up on tequila that day before. I mean, he is an absolute machine. I say all that. I don't think there's any shot of him coming back.
Josh, if he had played this year and then said, I'm retiring, I would think this could be a scenario. Yeah. But since he's been out of it for a year, he's got the deal with Fox Sports, going to pay him close to $400 million, basically. Like, there's no way to me he would do that. I think he's doing commercials with Affleck and, Matt Damon now and all that stuff. So I don't think so. And I do think Patrick Mahomes has a legitimate shot to catch him as far as number of rings. I do, especially catch him in the Patriots version of it, right? Just 6 of them, let alone the 7th he got. But I do think he has a chance here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a long shot. It's just kind of funny to think about. And the competitive person that he is would at least go, man, I could probably go.
Probably does think that.
Right. Hey, you mentioned that Brady getting on his offensive lineman. I mean, one of the biggest storylines of the Super Bowl was Travis Kelce. I mean, when you saw that interaction with Andy Reid there, as a former player, what went through your head?
Well, I'll say this. I caught some wind that, you saw him blow up on Andy Reid earlier this season. That was in regards to him being used on chip blocks as opposed to not getting out in routes and them not converting third downs when he's chipping to help out the tackles. And he was simply saying, bring in another offensive lineman if you have to, but get me out on the route. You're crushing Mahomes. And what it really does is puts more pressure on the rest of the O-line. So quit chipping me. So that was kind of their in-game kind of spat the first time. Man, when I saw that, I was thinking to myself, one, I know those guys are extremely close, and this is going to look way worse than it probably is. Now, if that's Diggs, I mean, the whole world is exploding right now. I mean, if Diggs bumped into and was yelling at Sean McDermott where he almost falls to the ground, which you don't want Andy Reid. I mean, Andy Reid doesn't need to hit the deck. I mean, that's not even a joke. Like, he's a bigger dude. He's older. Like, you don't just knock people to the ground like that. And when I'm watching it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not good. And I don't know what was said to Kelce prior to that Ravens game, but he came out with his hair on fire in that game. And it continued here where he's getting into it with people after the play. So in the heat of the moment, I mean, he bumped into him. And I've had my exchanges with coaches on the sideline where it's a heated moment and you're yelling at each other. You got 53 alpha males and then a whole coaching staff full of them. That stuff's going to happen. But man, it was a bad look. We haven't heard full context on it yet. Maybe the New Heights podcast will shed some light on it. You'll get one side of the story and then maybe Andy Reid will touch on it. I'm assuming those guys are so close that Travis felt comfortable and maybe didn't think he would knock Andy Reid, the way he did when he bumped into him. But that was a bad look, really bad look. What do you guys think? What do you think, Josh?
No, I think it was terrible. I saw it and I was just like, I went to exactly where your mind went. And that's, if this was Diggs and that was McDermott, holy cow. I mean, the headache of us having to talk about it ad nauseum would have just been, it gave me, like, it made me sick to my stomach. But it was, not only does the video look bad because you see him bump him, the still frame, the photo of him he looks like he's lost his mind. And I get it, heat of the moment and competitor and this and that, but there's also there's a lot to be said for having, the composure that you referenced with Patrick Mahomes and how the guy's just always seemed composed. And I get it, we've seen him go off too on the sideline, but we saw him go off on Josh Allen at the end of that game as well. But yeah, Sal, I don't know. I watched that and went, that is not, you just can't do it.
It's terrible.
Sal, do you have big thoughts on that?
I mean, it's terrible, but I would also say because they won, he kind of gets a little bit of a pass here as we talk about it, right?
Fact.
If they lose, it's a big story, a bigger story for sure. And oh my God, like what about that relationship? It's this. Look, if the Bills had beaten the Bengals, we would not talk nearly as much about Stephon Diggs demonstrative on the sidelines with Josh Allen. I mean, that's just the way it works, unfortunately, but it was a horrible look. And honestly, I thought, and it looks like I'm wrong right now, I did think Travis Kelce would retire after the season he had, after, being with Taylor and his brother walking out and his age and some of the injuries. I thought that would be the case. It was kind of like, maybe Andy Reid thinks about it. He probably, he loves to coach. I don't know. But it seems like both of those guys are coming back, I guess.
Yeah, that's how it appears. And, I was talking to Dawson Knox about this, so this will come out next week. You'll hear Dawson Knox on the Saturday Night Buffalo podcast. But we were talking about Travis Kelce, and we're like, it makes sense, but his intangibles, like his on-field IQ is what separates him. And now he's like, his athleticism is like his looseness. It's weird. Like, he can jump. Yes, he's fast. Yes, but he's not the fastest. He can't jump the highest. He's not the strongest. We were joking. He doesn't even have a vein in his arms. Like, he doesn't look like one of those intimidating guys on the other side of the field. He's not a great blocker, but man, he is smart on the football field. And I don't know if you guys heard him talking about the play that he made to Kadarius Toney against the Bills that got called back because Toney was offsides. And he was talking about, because they were asking him, is that something you guys work on? He said, no, Andy would never let us work on that. And he goes, if that ball gets tipped, I might not even be playing the next week. Andy would literally kill me in the meetings if that's a turnover in that situation. But he said it was single high coverage, so I knew where the safety was, and all of a sudden the corner was closing in on him. So he was completely trapped from the left-hand side. And so he goes, wait, nobody's out there. Tony's not blocking for me. I bet he's sitting over there. Until he goes, I just turned and in one motion just let it rip. And you're like, man, that is just – it's like a point guard that knows where everyone is on the field at the time. He's just got great IQ, and then he gets freedom within the route structure to be able to break off routes versus zone coverage and find the open gaps at times, which a lot of guys don't get that freedom, but you earn that freedom. It's not like, okay, every other tight end in NFL history would be that good. Well, you earn that over time. He was great before they probably gave him that freedom, but he's put together one hell of a career himself, and he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Let's switch gears to the 49ers for a second. The thing I cannot get past, and unfortunately, it's not all the individual performances that are sticking out to me. It's the fact that two other players, including an Ivy Leaguer, came out after the game and said he was unaware of the overtime rules. Sal,
thank you.
I mean, is that your biggest takeaway from the Niners?
Not my biggest takeaway necessarily, because I think that, you think about like their team and overall, but I do think it's a huge story for me, which is this. Look, I have no problem with them taking the ball in overtime. I think I might. I think your explanation is fine from Kyle Shanahan. You want the ball third. If you match each other, it's sudden death. I want it in that situation. I also respect the Chiefs saying we would have taken the ball because you can go down and you know what you need. I don't know if there's a right answer there. And analytically, I guess there isn't a right answer. They've run a lot of simulations. Zero issue with Kyle Shanahan taking the ball. Huge issue with his team not knowing the overtime rules. Now, does it matter in the moment if they really don't know if the game's over or not? They're not going to play differently necessarily. That's not why. To me, Eric, and you could speak to this if I'm right or wrong, it's a window into his coaching and preparation for his team. That's what it is. Andy Reid and the Chiefs apparently have been discussing this and practicing it and going over scenarios since training camp if they get into the playoffs. This guy never did it once. Not one team meeting did they have someone come in and go, hey, guys, listen, the rules have changed in overtime. If we ever get in this scenario, let's talk about what we're going to do and what's best for the team. Never did that. Bill Belichick's famous for stuff like that. I can't get over the fact that, like, it's not that I can't get over it. I think it's a real big peek into Kyle Shanahan's window of coaching and how if you're not talking about that, what else are you not preparing for throughout an 18-week season?
Right. That makes a ton of sense to me. And for some reason, it's a monster red flag. By all indications, these guys absolutely love Kyle Shanahan. Everybody glows about him, about his dad when they played for him, with his long run with the Broncos. I've heard legendary stories about Mike Shanahan, end of training camp parties for the guys that make the team. And, I'm sure Kyle is well revered in the locker room as well. But when you have guys coming out afterwards, and these are smart players, Armstead and Juszczyk, they've been in the league for a while. They're smart guys. They understand what they're saying when they say we weren't prepared for that moment. All they had to do is say, yeah, we knew. Mm-hmm. Even if they didn't, and it doesn't come back to the head coach. And so, yes, I think there is some minor details, and that's where head coaching experience matters in huge moments. We've seen Sean McDermott actually get better in big game moments at the end of games. I feel like he's gotten way more aggressive too, and just learning over time and observing. So Andy Reid now over time, okay, he knows how to prepare his guys for the Super Bowl week and all that. Okay, it's no longer a topic that, okay, we're not going to go out and party and this is our schedule. Okay, now it's these minute details that were lost with the 49ers. Josh, what'd you think about that?
Yeah, one of my other takeaways additional to that was, here's Kyle Shanahan now, who's widely considered one of the brightest offensive minds in the NFL, and once again has a double-digit lead in the Super Bowl just go poof and gone. I mean, at some point, to me, that 3 times now, that's a trend. It happens once, maybe it's, twice, maybe a coincidence. 3rd time, now it's a trend. I mean, that's something that's now going to kind of follow him, and unless he wins the Super Bowl, right? It's probably going to be part of his legacy that he leaves behind. That and the idea that, I mean, you look up and down that Niners roster, and it is star after star after star player. The only 2 spots, I mean, I know, don't get me wrong, Chris Jones, phenomenal player. I think Trent McDuffie has got a sensational career ahead of him, and Snead's great. But you look up and down that Niners roster, and really, there are 2 spots that you go, the Chiefs are superior. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes. And in the NFL, sometimes that's all you need. And it showed, because when the game was on the line and the most important decisions needed to be made, Andy Reid was the one that outperformed Kyle Shanahan, and Patrick Mahomes was the one that outperformed Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I talked to an offensive line coach in the NFL that was in the playoffs this year, but not with the Bills. So it was not Aaron Cromer. And he said, hey, for as long as I've been in the NFL, my observation now is that play calling and game managing is a lot more important than I thought earlier in my career. Earlier in my career, it was always the old saying, it's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. Well, you know what? Putting your guys in positions to succeed, and yes, you have to have a quarterback or else it's going to be really tough. You need a generational defense to win a Super Bowl with a mediocre quarterback. Well, and that's happened before, but you can have mediocre players all over the field and script them open and manage the game perfectly. And a guy named Mecole Hardman, who was traded back to you because he stunk with the Jets, is the guy who scores the game-winning touchdown. It's guys on the field in a 6th-round running back in Pacheco, or 7th round, or whenever he was drafted. It's guys like that. But then you have Patrick Mahomes, and you have an excellent offensive mind being able to get those guys open, get them up and down the field, and then manage the game correctly. And I thought that was an interesting take, because you guys have heard it as much as me. Coaching, only takes you so far. The players got to make the plays. The scheme is what it is. Well, you know what? I've played for good and bad offensive coordinators, and it's not very fun going into a game when you have a defense on the other side that knows you don't have that much in your arsenal, and they probably have a good idea what's coming. Yeah, it makes your job a whole lot harder as an offensive lineman. But, I mean, look at the Miami Dolphins offensive line this year. They got multiple guys ranked in like the top of the PFF rankings. Well, half the time they're blocking for a second and a half in the pass game, and then the run game's just out the gate past them as soon as they touch somebody. Like,
great context. I like that. That's really good context for that, because you're right. And they're known for this high flying, offense, and you got to think on the fly and do all this, but how much work are they really doing up front, in what they're doing on the back end?
Right. Yeah. So Mike McDaniel could make an offensive line look excellent.
Yes.
So could Kyle Shanahan, the way he scripts plays. And Josh, you made a great point. If it happens 3 times, okay, now it's a trend. And what's causing that? Are you taking your foot off the gas? Are you calling plays differently? Are you too aggressive in those moments? That's going to be an ultimate self-study for them this offseason.
It kind of got not talked about because it didn't matter. Because they got bailed out. The first 3 plays of overtime, Christian McCaffrey didn't touch the ball. I think they threw it each play, and not to him. What is going on? It's overtime. We're starting over, reset. Okay, team, just let's calm down. We got the ball first here. First and 10, shotgun, empty. Like, what is he doing? But he got bailed out because remember on 3rd down there was a holding call on the Chiefs. I think to your point, I didn't understand that, but nobody talks about it because it didn't matter. They had the first down. Christian McCaffrey didn't touch the ball in the first 3 plays until they finally got a first down via penalty.
Yeah, and that guy's a freak. Josh, we talked about it last week. That's one of the dudes you'd buy a ticket for to watch play nowadays. And, dude, he's truly special. He goes over 160 yards in the game from scrimmage. He's so good out of the backfield. He's perfect in that system. I mean, who knows what he looks like in a Bills uniform, but, there's that obvious Panthers, the Bills connection. And when there was that fire sale with the Panthers, I mean, he's a special player. And I thought Brandon Beane would make a run at him. Who knows if he would have, or if he tried to, and just the price was too high or whatever. But they sent him to the NFC. So it's not like it was a situation where, oftentimes on a trade, they'll say, okay, let's block a conference. But that dude is special.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing with, and I don't know that this maybe was a little bit of a worry when it comes to Brandon Beane and Sean and the whole staff thinking about McCaffrey. Is he was really banged up through Carolina, his days in Carolina. And I mean, we talk about it ad nauseum, what's the value of a running back? Now, what we've seen is the value of Christian McCaffrey is different than the value of your ordinary everyday running back. I mean, he is one, we hear it all the time. He's one of one. Christian McCaffrey is absolutely one of one, and he is worth everything that the Niners had to do to get him. But I wonder if those injuries, because then he got to San Francisco, and of course, Eric, you know this, a little easier to play through bumps and bruises, when you're on a 14-win team.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about that. And, is it the staff? Is it usage? Is it, whatever the case is? Did he learn from his times getting banged up there, and now he trains differently in the offseason? I was talking to Anish Shroff, who calls play-by-play for the Panthers in the preseason a couple years ago, and he was saying that McCaffrey was only practicing 2 or 3 times a week during training camp because he refuses to take his foot off the gas. And when they leave him out there, they're so worried he's going to blow a hamstring because when he's out there, he's 1,000 miles an hour at all times. So they have to pull the reins on him, and maybe they're better at pulling the reins on him out in San Francisco and keeping him a little healthier and not as much wear and tear throughout the week. Before we get going here, we got to circle it back to the Bills. And okay, you look at this run by the Chiefs, and look, there's nothing that tells you that the gap is too far to overcome. I mean, the Bills play wire to wire with them in the playoffs. They beat them in the regular season. It's not like they can't overcome it. But when you look at what the Bills either need to add, do differently in the playoffs, what comes to mind, Sal, when you think, okay, in 2024, the Bills are beating the Chiefs in the playoffs if they do what?
I think it's the same thing that's the overall picture for this team. They need to have an ability to be more explosive down the field. Having a quicker strike, or even if it's not timing-wise quicker strike, just the ability that no matter where they are, it doesn't have to take 7, 8, 9-play drives, which is really what they were very good at that. But that's also more of a chance to make a mistake, and that's what happened. They made too many mistakes. If they can get the ball in the end zone a little bit quicker, and I think that's part of the reason, they tried. They had their shot to Shakir and that last play that didn't work out, that second down play. But they need more explosive plays, and that's overall, but that's also against a team like Kansas City in the playoffs when they need to make a play.
Yeah, I'll kick it to you in a second, Josh. Did you hear Josh Allen talk this week that he has no regrets over that, over making that throw and that decision in the red zone or down to Shakir? His only thing that he regrets is not stepping up. He said he thought he was better protected, so he just stood there and waited for it. And he's like, I should have just moved up knowing that someone could eventually bump me if I stay back there. But he's like, no, that's the read. He was open. No, I don't regret making that throw. Do I wish third down was a better decision? Maybe, but he's like, he was asked specifically about that play. Josh, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, after the season was over, we heard from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane in their press conferences, and they both sent one message and made it clear, because they mentioned it a few different times, and that was, this isn't a tear it down to the studs type of thing. Eric, you mentioned it. They know they're close. And I know that doesn't get you anything, and it doesn't make you feel better by being close. You're either good enough or you're not, but they are. They're so close. And we talked about it last week is, maybe Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady 2.0. Okay, well, then does that mean Josh Allen is Peyton Manning 2.0? Like, is that, and eventually Peyton Manning got Tom Brady in the postseason. It took him a few tries, but then he got him. And then he won a Super Bowl. And then of course he goes to Denver and he gets another one. But once he got past him once, he was able to get past him a few times, and he was able to get a couple of rings. And look, if the idea that Josh Allen plays himself into being Peyton Manning 2.0, I mean, no one looks at Peyton Manning and goes, man, what a wasted career. I think I would like to think everybody would sign up for that in a heartbeat. I see a team that is so close, and right now they are blocked by, this isn't like, people keep bringing up the Patriots and, is the Patriots situation worse than what the Bills situation, or than what the Chiefs situation is right now? But the thing is, right now, they've got Josh Allen, and back then when they were going and losing to Tom Brady, it was always in the regular season. So to me, that's apples and oranges.
It is. I would also, it'd be interesting to talk to someone from that indie market, like through that late 2000s where, it was right before they got over the hump, right before they were able to beat the Patriots, the Colts, that is, with Peyton Manning in the playoffs. Like, what was their media saying about Peyton Manning, or what was their thoughts about the organization? Was it every single year? How do we retool? Do we have to scrap the no-huddle offense? Do we need to do something defensively different? Do we got to switch up the scheme and get rid of Tony Dungy? Like, I would be interested to see what their media situation was like at the time. And that's not being critical of the Buffalo media. That's just simply to like, hey, what was it like? Because I feel like we're kind of in your shoes right now. When I look at it, my kind of top takeaways would be, especially with the fact that the Chiefs have had so much turnover year over year, that like, if the Bills move on from some familiar faces, like, we need to not be really upset about it, which I would, like, it's been tough. This has been such a special run because I've gotten to have relationships with so many of these guys, and they're around year after year, but the Chiefs dispose of them. And now the Chiefs are going to be sitting there with 50, 70 million to spend this offseason still, because they make those decisions and let them go. To me, if the Bills just simply get healthy and run it back, I like their roster a lot. Now, the salary cap would say that they aren't going to be able to necessarily run this roster back. They're going to have to draft well. I'm with you, Sal. I think when the Patriots were on their run, everyone was drafting linebackers to try and keep up with Gronk and Hernandez, and you're doing all these things. Okay, we need a better nickel because Welker's killing everybody, or we need a tall corner because Randy Moss is out there. Instead of being like, why don't we just build the best stinking roster we can and then build a bunch of firepower on the offense side of the ball, and maybe we go try and outscore them in those instances. But when I look at it and I look at the way the Bills have been beating the playoffs the last 3 years and really 4 years, they have not been able to get pressure with a four-man rush in the playoffs in their elimination games. Have they at times? Yes, but not when they've been eliminated. So is it Von Miller rebounding next year? Is it Ed Oliver taking the next step? Is it Greg Rousseau? Someone's got to take the next step, because they can't go out and pay a big time, or is it someone you draft? Regardless, you got to put pressure on the quarterbacks in the playoffs. You know, the 49ers stuck with them. They stacked Patrick Mahomes 3 times in that game, but how many times, whether it was blitzing or Chris Jones or Karlaftis, were they able to get around Brock Purdy and affect him? So you got to affect the quarterback. And then I'm with you, Sal. Add another offensive weapon. The offensive line should be intact. I don't know, you know, if someone isn't back, they have reserves to where you don't need to go out and pay someone or draft someone early necessarily. Give me a weapon on the offensive side of the ball to be able to just outpace teams. And then, you know, the Bills were fortunate, besides Gabe Davis, to keep very healthy in their skill guys this year. If you're not, you know, if Diggs goes down this year, man, you really need another weapon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like the Indy point too about, you know, that I heard you should have Jeff Saturday on. Just suggest a center and a center, right? He was actually asked about this on Pat McAfee today. He said that at that time, the Colts had to get a little more physical. I know that's not the answer you're looking for necessarily, but you're right. Like the question is like, how did you view the Patriots in building the roster more than anything, right? So I think that's an interesting one. So yeah, for me, they need to attack the wide receiver spot, need to get more explosive. But I heard Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott basically say that, and that's why I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And also, like, not for nothing, that with these 2 new coordinators, they've gotten younger, likely more aggressive, energetic. You know, energetic, you say that, but like on a week-to-week basis, sometimes that matters in the NFL. The energy those guys bring each and every day to the facility, keep those guys going, keep everybody in it. And then we're likely going to see more creative schemes on both sides of the ball, which I also think could be an advantage for the Bills next year as well. Any closing thoughts, Josh?
You know, you mentioned the energy, you know, and the younger guys on the coaching staff. Sal, you had one of the beat guys on today on the radio for the Patriots, and he talked about Bourne being an energy guy and that you need a handful of those guys in December when it's freezing cold outside and it's a Wednesday and nobody wants to be out there at practice. And you know, obviously this was a player he was referring to, but that's a good point. You know, these coaches, you know, when you look at a Bobby Babich and a Joe Brady, they may need to help get these guys over the hump at times when it's 15 degrees out and it's the end of December and it's been a long, you know, not a long year maybe record-wise, but the grind gets long.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sal, you got any closing remarks?
No, man. It's been fun talking with you guys about all of this. I guess my closing remark is I'm glad that we don't have to talk about the Chiefs in the Super Bowl anymore, and we can all look at the standings and say they're 0-0. It kind of sucks to see them win again, but it's the offseason. So combine and, you know, draft and free agency and pitchers and catchers report this week too. Yeah,
no doubt about it. Yeah, my boy Josh Rogers reports this Sunday, he was telling me. So, yeah, he pitches the Rockies organization. But, no, I'm with you. It's at this point, you're ready to turn the page. And the Chiefs are the betting favorite next year. The Bills are either 4th or 5th, depending where you're looking. I mean, the Chiefs are the betting favorite. And then come mid-year, they'll be 7-4, you know, and everyone will say, this is the year they're out of it. And then someone's going to have to play a clean game in the playoffs. And hopefully it's the Bills that take them out next year. Fellas, thank you for the time. This was fun. There's honestly maybe not 2 other guys that I'd rather chop it up about the Super Bowl than you guys. So really appreciate that one.
Thanks, you too, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.